I'd like to ask our panelists to take a quick minute to introduce themselves, beginning with Frank, followed by Zach, Lou, Kirsten. I guess we're out of order a little bit, so I'm going to go out of order. Lou, why don't you go ahead and start?
Sure, thank you. Thank you for very happy to be here. My name is Lou Han. I'm a partner at Lumira Ventures. We're a North American-focused life science venture fund. In the last 20 plus years, we deployed over $700 million into companies in North America, built 40 plus products FDA approved on the market, both in biotech and medical device. Very excited to be here.
Awesome. Kirsten, why don't you go next?
Hi, my name is Kirsten. I am a partner at PL Capital. We're a family of venture funds, one of which is based on neurotechnology. I have been in the VC space for about 10 years, investing in digital health, consumer health, and now neuro. I am based here in Salt Lake City and excited to be here.
Frank?
I'm Frank Langston. I'm an investor with the Thiel Bio Fund. My background, I was a founder, started actually a financial technology company and sold that after running it for about 10 years. And then kind of made a shift into biotech through COVID, where I built a biosecurity business as part of a company called Ginkgo Bioworks in Boston. We took that public after about 18 months. And then I ended up coming over to the full biotech, both operating and investing side with the Thiel Bio group. And so I'm an investor in that group. And I also spend a lot of time with our portfolio companies on their operations.
Awesome. Zach?
I'm Zach Betts. I'm with Zandia Ventures. We are a family office fund. We invest in medtech, biotech, healthcare AI, getting into women's health. We've raised probably $100 million over the past 5 years with startups we've worked with, more of an investor-operator model. But we're based in Walnut Creek, California, looking to do some more work here and possibly move to the Salt Lake City area. So we're excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining us and sharing your wisdom with this group today. I think people are particularly hungry to learn about what it's like in this environment from an investor perspective. So I'll start out by asking, what is it like in 2026, and how is that different from maybe a year ago or 5 years ago? What should people looking for money expect in comparison to how investing has been previously?
Sure, happy to start. I think we're coming out of COVID. I guess we're still digesting a little bit of overcapitalization of the market. I think there's certainly a reset, in valuations of many companies, and the expectation of investors is higher than before in terms of deliverables and focus. But on the positive side, there's a lot of positive signals still showing that IPO market is recovering. Strategics are hungry for acquisition targets to fill their gap in revenue in the next 10 years. And there are more and more companies are forming around really breakthrough technologies. So very exciting time, I'd say.
That's great. Anybody else have anything else to add? Any different perspectives?
I think just when you look at the incentives and the macro side, you touched on it a little bit, but like you had an extended ZIRP environment, and then you had a COVID bubble, and then I think we've mostly reset from that. But I think a lot of people in the industry, like that's all they knew for 12 plus years. And so like we're kind of back on the same curve we were kind of pre-COVID, but also now like not in a ZIRP environment. So like those are the two backdrops. And then all of that from a founder perspective, someone raising money, that's just the dynamic of the LPs of the funds that you're raising from, right? So like how are they perceiving the space? And your investors, they have to make pitches too. And so understanding like how you fit into their story is often a useful way to help highlight the right points, and like how are they going to tell that in the story of their fundraise.
That's great. Zach, anything else?
Yeah, I think it's, I started into this 5 years ago, 2020. We started our fund and made investments and started jumping into it. So I do feel it's different today. I just came from, or at least we scan opportunities in Europe, the Middle East, Asia and China, and I see a lot of collaboration between deal sharing and evaluation of companies. I'd say from when I started, it was more of a, if you made it past the investment committee to offer it to a syndicate and you were able to kind of get that bar out there. But now it seems like there's a lot more scrutiny on evidence and what you're doing today and what your regulatory paths are a lot more kind of discipline in that. So I'd say, and then investments in fitting them into your portfolio like the others shared, where how do those synergies fit? Across all the players in the market. So it's exciting times, but there's a lot of contacts and things happening within that deal flow.
Great. I think a lot of our companies out here are curious and want to know what your answer is to how do they get that first meeting? What is something that if you see a deck come through or you meet a founder that's especially compelling to get that first meeting where they can really explore their company and hopefully make a good connection with you?
I'm happy to start on that one. I think one thing that I don't think a lot of founders realize, that anyone who is maybe, and I've been there, who's maybe an associate or senior associate, their job is to take hundreds of first meetings, but what they're doing is collecting information, and that is their job. Their job is to meet hundreds of companies and then go back to the rest of their team and say, these are the trends I'm seeing, but they're using it to their own benefit. They're using it to look good to their bosses, and they're also using it so that they can be part of that trend spotting and also, figuring out which companies are actually kind of worth moving into that IC. So I do feel like a lot of founders get that first meeting, but they actually think it's a better signal than it really is. If you're not being moved on to that second meeting, that's the one that's really important. So the first meeting, I think actually I tell founders to be a little more scrutinous on who they're actually taking it with. So they shouldn't be going out and wasting any time with somebody who actually has never invested in their stage or their sector. They will take the meeting. They will take the meeting so that they can learn and they can get better, and that's what they're doing. But it's not going to be symbiotic, and they're just wasting your time. So the first meeting, I actually tell founders to be a lot more selective than just try to get first meetings with people who actually would never write you a check.
It's great advice. Make sure your time is well spent. Lou, it looks like
Yeah,
you
no,
bad.
it's to the similar point. I would say one thing important I always tell entrepreneurs is you got to learn a little bit more about the funds that you want to meet. Where do they focus? Have they done similar investment in the space? Where are they in their fund cycle? Does that really fit with what you're looking for? There's a lot of information that you can get before even step into the first meeting, so that you make sure that it's a worthwhile time for both parties.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think it's probably the answer that founders want to hear the least, but the right introduction and the right network into a fund is usually what's going to get your deck paid attention to, give you an initial stamp of credibility. I hated hearing that answer as a founder, but there are ways to do that. So I think a lot of the early energy can be spent on finding a key kind of node that you build a strong relationship with that can then do that for you. They don't have to be a investor. They don't have to be in a fund. It's probably better that they're not. But if it's a successful founder, mentor, advisor, someone that has credibility with those relationships, that can just kind of put your company or your name at the top of the pile, that can have a catalytic effect.
That's great. Do you guys see anything in conversation or in decks that are immediate signs that you want to talk to that company more and you want to learn more about them? Or on the contrary, do you see things in decks or hear things in conversations that are immediate turnoffs, like where this conversation's done, we're not interested?
Well, obviously, if the company is focused on neuro and you try to pitch a cancer company, it doesn't necessarily fit. But more so, what I see is, entrepreneurs really knows their story, but they oftentimes struggle to articulate what exactly is the value proposition of differentiation in a 3-5 minutes period. Working on that messaging, I think, is critical.
That's great advice. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think there's a high bar for a founder when they're putting their pitch together. I mean, we see a lot of pitch decks. There's kind of standard formats between 10 and 15 pages. Some go really long. If they're long, you probably get less chance to get looked at. But I think as you key on the founder's ability to articulate kind of where the value prop, where the science is, to compose a story where you can explain the scientific research in the background as well as the commercial opportunity and what they see in the forefront. They say that there's 3 things that really can break a company. One is seeing the future of their company, executing, and then completing the things that they're doing. So I kind of look for those there's a number of metrics you kind of look at that are really important, but really having a good, concise story about your opportunity.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, like the really quick glance things you look for are, other investors that are involved. You'll look at, kind of queuing signals on the team from an experience. For us, we invest throughout company life cycle. I mean, everything from a, seed stage check to, a crossover round. So the answer is very different in those different stages. But if we're talking mostly about earlier stage, I think it's those 2 things. But I think the other thing that we all have biases from everything else that we see or the biology we're interested in. And so when you see something that's either confirmatory or kind of aligned but not exactly in the mainstream of what's out there and trendy, that's interesting, right? So if I'm already kind of thinking about a certain theses around a target or a disease area and something shows up, then I'm just biased to jump into that. You can't predict that, but that's where shots on goal starts to come into play and trying to find those opportunities. And usually, but it needs to be something that's interesting, right? New versus something I've already seen several times before.
That's great. Along those lines, early stage companies often hear they need to de-risk the investment to attract capital. What does that mean to you, and how can companies be thoughtful about how they do that?
I'll go ahead. I think that the biggest thing that when I'm talking to a founder and when I think about de-risk is I want to see a founder that is thinking 3 steps ahead on every issue. They don't need to have the full solution, but I need to understand and know that I'm betting my career and money that I've collected from LPs and my reputation on this founder to deliver. And what that means is I want to know that in the best of times and the worst of times, that founder is going to figure it out. So if they can come into a meeting and they can preempt my questions, they've thought about things that I'm going to ask and they have answers ready, or they're answering those questions before I even can ask them. That's always very helpful. And I also want to know that they're so scrappy and that they're going to figure it out and they're not going to come to me and say, yeah, well, I tried and we're just going to wind down. I want someone who's going to go out there and they're going to fight as hard as they can to keep things alive. They're going to pivot. They're going to be able to make lemonade out of lemons when they are served them, because it happens. So that's the biggest thing I'm looking for on de-risking just the founder.
That's great. And knowing where your faults are, where your holes are.
Absolutely. We always used
addressing
to
those.
say confident yet humble. So I want someone to come in. I want them to be confident. Obviously, they're the #1 salesperson for their company, so they need to sell very, very well to both me and their potential, whoever their buyer is. But they also need to be humble enough to know where their faults lie and not be blind to them as well, and know that they do have them, and be working on what those things are and trying to find solutions before the problems happen.
It's great.
It's really good. That's really good. And actually, it's interesting because you may see the startup and the founder several times before you're digging into it, and you may have some words about maybe I could see a little bit more of this, or I could, get into their data room. But it is about them being able to take advice and form that into, what they're thinking and being pliable for the advice. And when you can take that away and be adaptable, that's a really, key characteristic about, because you're not going to know it all. And, if you can adapt and fit all these experts that are around you, that's going to be a great way to kind of win over investors.
That's great. Yeah, go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, I think maybe there's 3 things. So one, I think first of all, like the confidence, but that's just like insane persistence and resilience. It's a completely irrational thing to do to start a company. Like there is no textbook or model that will tell you it's like the logical thing to do. And so you have to have a mindset that you're going to persevere through all of the challenge that will inevitably arise. And then I think the point about selling yourself, but one of the things that we also look at is like, be ready and willing and open to like bring in your team or talk about your team, because that's an early reflection of the founder's ability to like sell their employees, right? Like bring the right people in, and a reflection of their humility and where they're able to, attract the right complementary talent and like build a high performing team. And when we've looked at this, there's like 90 different areas of expertise that are required to take something from like discovery to clinical POC. And so there is very much a team sport. And you've got to have a founder that's able to, both lead, but really like bring in the right people. And I had one other point that I'm not going to.
Oh, that was excellent. It was excellent. It was excellent.
I was fully agree with all the comments on the team. I would say specifically in life sciences, let's say on the therapeutic side, the definition of de-risking is a little bit disease specific a lot of times. I mean, if you are preclinical companies developing therapeutics, depending on the TA you're focused on, the animal models data might be more translatable or less so. Right, so then the de-risking is a variable, depends on the TA focus. On the medical device side, for us, we want to be the first check to go in to scale up the company, and the team experience is super critical. If you have been there, done that in these really complicated logistic, supply chain, manufacturing, commercialization, that's super critical for us as a de-risking.
Awesome.
I didn't remember. It actually goes back a little to the first question about things that have changed, but and to the point about like seeing 3 steps ahead. But we've got to have a founder and a leadership team that like understands the financing risk for the company through the next several phases of value inflection. So like when you're pitching, we're going to get to this milestone, all I'm looking at there is like, okay, what is a lead investor in the next round going to look at in terms of what that means and what's coming after that, right? So me investing in this round, like that's my risk is like once you get to what I'm going to assume you do that. I've diligenced, I'm like fully bought in now, but I also have to believe that what's coming after that is going to be sufficient and appropriate for the next capital round, and really I've got to believe that like multiple times over. I think a lot of founders think like, well, no, I've just got to get to the next point, right? Or I just need more time, I just need another study. But it very much matters like how that plays into like your entire financing risk and capital strategy.
Yeah. Each time you take money, you're at a new starting line, right? Like you're not at the finish line, you're at the next starting line.
And it's always like not it's never what have you done for me, right?
Right.
It's always what are you doing next?
Exactly, yeah.
That's really, the landscape has changed. And back to the first question, what it's like today is there's founders that can be aware of what's happening in that landscape and paying attention to it, whether it's podcasts and really being in tune. Things like the FDA 3.0 that's coming out, those things are 20, 30 drivers. That's pretty close to what you're going to experience in any regulatory path right now. So then that kind of leans you towards like, how are you looking at your regulatory path or your study design that can benefit from the new technology? So there's a lot of contributing factors today on bringing science that's different than it was 5, 10 years ago. So it's exciting, but there's also, whether there are new methods that are being developed that are coming from industry and diagnostic or tools that can give you, more biomarkers and things like that there wasn't there before, or that's AI-driven. It's an interesting intersection that's proposed, and we'll see how that develops. But paying attention is to the landscape and understanding those things when you're articulating it can be a deal maker.
Yeah, that's great. So what are you guys most excited about, or to the contrary, most cautious about? Are there certain sectors that you're really digging into deeply? Have you invested in certain companies recently that you're really excited about that you can share with us? What are you excited about, or are there things that people should be cautious about?
Happy to start. So we are lead investor in Ann Arbor, Michigan-based company called Histosonics. It's the world's first non-invasive way to ablate solid tumor in human. Commercial stage, U.S.-based company. Super excited. The growth of the company is incredible. Patient impact is just phenomenal. These are end-stage liver cancer patients. Otherwise, got 3-5 months left, and they can go into a procedure, minimum pain, minimum bleeding, an hour later, and go home the same night, have dinner with their family, and cancer-free.
Wow.
And then they go on to cruise, they go ski, and so the patient impact from this company is just phenomenal. And they're expanding globally. We're super excited about it. We've been tracking the company for almost 7 years before we made the first investment, and we're super excited about the next phase.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
So in neurotechnology, it's obviously a very large sector, and so we break it into 3 things that we are investing into. So repair, enhance, and connect. So repair is literally performing miracles, repairing functions that people have lost, whether that is the ability to, drive a car if they're paraplegic, or restoring sight, restoring hearing, things like that. There's actually a couple companies in Salt Lake that are working on things like that, and that's the sector we are in right now. Those things are happening, and there's patients who are experiencing these incredible miracles. Enhance is kind of the next stage that we're moving into, which is how can we use neurotechnology to help things like sleep, focus, drive, help people with medical-resistant depression, things like that. And then the next one is connect. And connect, we feel, is more 15 to 20 years out, but we obviously still want to look for that. It sounds very sci-fi, and on a movie it might be called something like uploading, but really connecting incredible amounts of knowledge into LLMs, and, uploading people's ability and connecting the brain to computers going forward.
Very cool. Very cool. Frank?
I'd say one of the core kind of theses we have is really looking for expandable biology, or like broadly applicable biology, where there's a good kind of prototypical indication that you can start with, often genetic, but where that biology then, if it's validated, there is relevance across multiple indications. When we look at the landscape of a lot of the most successful durable companies and therapies, that's a common path, is that indication expansion, early validation. You can do it within rare. There's large rare diseases, and or from rare to common diseases, which is more difficult. There's fewer examples of that, but that type of really in-depth insight into initial biology, like a thesis on how that expands, we see those as having really category-defining company potential.
Great.
Wow, those are all really good. I kind of along the same lines. We kind of, as we've been doing a lot of deal flow in recent months, a lot of it is focused on those platform plays where there's opportunities from maybe a core science that they're actually targeting a core market, but that there's opportunities for that IP to be applied in other spaces, or other tool sets that are very promising as well, or synergistic across other spaces. Interesting, just even recently I was visiting a lab in the Bay Area, and there's a lot of context around biology and then in agriculture. that I'm just opening my eyes to some of that. So there are opportunities like that could be applied different ways. But we are focused in primarily, we jumped into organ transplant, where that preservation method is actually applicable in cell and gene therapy. So we kind of look for those kind of plays across tissue on a chip. Things like that are really kind of coming about and now that kind of lands into this FDA modernization where they're going to do studies away from animals and using human organoid structures. So exploring a lot of things that have that kind of cross synergy, and then also healthcare AI. There's a lot of words. It's hard to sort out through AI in the health tech space, but really there are some that are really making traction in workflow automation and patient care that is actually more cited for the preventative measure than it is dealing with disease. And you see that in chronic care workflow that is actually helping the physician side with improved reimbursements and things like that have a real economic story. So you kind of sort through all of those, and we're kind of excited about all the things that are going on. It's fun stuff. And there's certainly a lot of learning across the opportunities.
It's a good answer. You're excited about everything.
Yeah.
I like it.
I'll say one point on that too. Like, we look at adjacent trends. So when we look at some of the AI stuff, we might not be investing in like an AI-enabled EHR or something like that, but we're looking at like when that change happens, what are the implications for therapeutics or devices? So like, where are you going to see like big shifts in diagnosis that has been, underdiagnosed? A lot of that is interesting in rare, where you've got, physicians are trained, like, look for horses, not zebras, right? Like, they have a default path, and so you end up under-indexing a lot of these like rare diseases, and we think that, integrated EHR-supported diagnostic might change that significantly. There's other similar type things that, we're looking at how that would impact, and we look at companies through that lens.
That makes a lot of sense. Frank, you touched on this earlier a little bit about how companies can have a great pitch and get that first meeting. A lot of it is about bringing your coworkers and showing that you can compel people to come work with you and for you who believe in the story. So can you guys talk a little bit about what does a top-tier founder team look like to you? If somebody is in deep science, what kind of skill set should they be thinking about adding from a business perspective to make their story more compelling?
I'll jump into that. I think there's we see deals at different stages of growth and the beginnings where they may start with more of an academic advisory reflection of people that have helped them get there and in-kind services that have helped them get through their research. But there's a time when you have got to have that commercial kind of valid team around you as far as understanding whether it's regulatory or, or the manufacturing side and the scientific side and what research is going on. So I kind of find that there's a need to really show that you've got some of your team members that are strong across the functional disciplines on the commercial side. And you kind of look for that to say, are founders still anchoring their value prop in the academic world and the kind of the KOLs that happen, or are they really kind of moving towards the commercial validation where I've got somebody from a Biomerics or a Merit Medical that actually have been there, done that, and you kind of check the boxes. They're in good hands along the way. So I think they're important, and a lot of it's about timing when you need to do that. I'd say an early stage, we're kind of getting more scientific validation from the KOLs and things, but be ready for building a commercial team at some point.
Great.
Yeah, I think the experience absolutely depends on the stage. At the very early stage, we do 10-15% company creation and spin outs. At the very early stage, you might be okay with scientific founders plus a project manager. But at some point, you do need the company building experience. What I mean by that is, how do you design your regulatory path forward? How do you prioritize your indication of choice? How do you reach out to investor base that's relevant to what you're doing? These are the things might not necessarily the skill sets for academic trainers. So at some point, you need to transition the team from academic lab to a company building exercise.
Great.
I've very much seen in any technical industry, not just bio, that a lot of times we do have these hyper-technical founders and teams, and they do underestimate the distribution point, and they underestimate how much they need that, and they think that because they have this, incredible technology, the world is just going to see it as much as they do because they've been working on it and they're so deep into it. And so I'm definitely looking for commercialization and people who are good at that and distributing it, because if you don't, you can have the best technology in the world and the best solution in the world, but if people can't sell it, or your team can't sell it, or you can't get anybody using it, then it's of no use. So I'm definitely looking for that.
That's great.
Yeah, I think we'll go Zen. I think first, know yourself as a founder and be willing to embrace, do you want to be a CEO? Is that how you want to spend your time? Talk to other CEOs, understand what that means. It means that you're often not as close to the research as you may want to be if that's your background, or to the clinic if that's your background. So I think that's an important first step, and that humility, right, that can come across very well with investors. And even if you were an initial founder and you brought in the right partner, that can be a wise move. It'll also just make your life better because you'll be doing the things you want to do. But if you want to be a CEO, that's fantastic too. Just grow into that skill set. I think the other thing is having a drug that quote works is rarely enough. Majority of drugs that get FDA approval are not successful in the market, right? The industry knows that. So I think that having early stage, you definitely want the right regulatory and clinical expertise to kind of think ahead, because you make so many decisions as early as your first target product profile at a lead candidate selection that have downstream consequences for the next 10 plus years. And you need the lens in the room that lets you, even if they're not an FTE, right? Even if it's the right advisor or you're getting the right external feedback, you need to see the implications of that decision from a regulatory standpoint, from a clinical development standpoint, and then ultimately where and how you would fit in the market. Because otherwise you're very likely to, most companies are going to, because of capital needs, bandwidth, skills, you're going to default optimize for the fastest, cheapest path to technical and early regulatory success. And when you do that, you're likely making trade-offs that are going to hurt you down the line when you're needing to raise the next round of capital or position for a partnership or, ultimately position for an exit. So I think at a high level, that is, it is a lot of work, but that's what you have to be thinking about in the beginning, not just does the science work, does the biology work, does the drug quote work.
Yeah.
It's something I've heard a lot recently is the difference between preparing your company to sell it versus to be bought. And that distinction is getting to those inflection points that are really proving the science, and the kind of opportunities that you can see in certain spaces. They're probably likely to be acquired, and they're commercially they kind of go into the funnel in that space. Where others in the med tech and healthcare space, they tend to be, build an infrastructure, build a team around you. If you really want this to, and a lot of inventors and founders can really be amazed by the gap that they're filling for their technology, but they're not necessarily putting the commercial sense around it being a purchased asset, where they need to operate, and they need to manufacture, and that's that kind of scale-up curve that you need to be anticipating. So that whole distinction about what's the difference in sell and buying a company is really a valuable perspective to kind of take what's ahead of you.
That's great advice. We have about 5 to 7 minutes left. I wanted to touch on, you guys are such quality investors, and we're seeing so much momentum in the investor community here, in addition to the life sciences community. We still do hear from time to time that it's easier to get money on the coast. It's easier to get money in bigger city markets where more VCs are central to those areas. Can you share a little bit about what you think, a Utah company should be doing that may be different in terms of meeting investors, in terms of getting the word out about their company? And Lou, maybe you could share a little bit about your investment thesis and that you shared your best success stories maybe don't fit into that thesis always.
Yeah, I think as a firm, one of our core strategies, we invest underserved regions. What I mean by that is great scientific talent, great opportunities, but not much of a local venture risk capital to support that. And we've been very successful over the last 4 funds that invest in North America. So one of the things that being able to consistently practice that strategy is you'll be ready to be value add. Because one of the disadvantage being in one of these regions is that you don't have maybe a lot of access to investor networks or strategics. That's why we, as a typically lead investor on the board, we always try to help the company to connect to that world, connect to bankers, to present at banker conferences, to connect to our investor in the syndication process, strategic universe. I think there's a lot of hard work you have to do, be ready to be part of the team. That's the value add that we see you have to bring into a company outside of Bay Area and Boston.
Great. Anybody else?
I think I would say flip to the advantage and then solve the problem. So flip to the advantage is building outside the hubs. You can probably build a more durable team, right? You have less of a mercenary workforce. We actually look for this in some of our portfolio companies, and I'll even go back to the analogy in tech. I was building a software company, right, starting in late 2000s, and at that point in time, the investor assumption was if you're not building your software team in the Bay Area, they must suck, right? Everyone, no one else is any good. All the best talent is here. By the time you got to 6 years later, 2014, it was, so where are you accessing a differentiated talent base that isn't astronomically expensive and that you will actually retain for more than 12 months? So where are you building your software team that's outside the Bay Area, and then who's the small group you have here? So I think there's a similar evolution that may be happening in biotech, that we're so interested in. So we have companies that are, based in Pennsylvania, based in suburbs of LA, and we see it as an advantage because they have good local talent, and they're bringing in the right talent they need, and then solve the problem. So if you're in Salt Lake, just have in your base plan, you're going to spend 2 days a month in the Bay Area, and you're just going to act like you're part of the network. If you're in Cleveland, do the same thing in Boston. And it's not you're not then getting really any differential visibility if you kind of go build the right nodes, say, oh, hey, I'd love to catch up with you. And you're still kind of part of the ecosystem, and you're able to build those networks while taking advantage of a remote. But you do still need to do some of that work to get to the long-term capital plans, right? You will, when you get to a Series B, you almost certainly want some of the investor network, the hubs, because that's what they all are, and then New York certainly as you get into later and later stage crossover other forms of financing. So you kind of just have to do the legwork, I think, and I don't know there's a great shortcut for that otherwise.
Yeah, that's great. Highlighting the advantages of being here, because I think there's a lot of them, I think that's a great point.
I was just going to quickly add that, I do think there is some advantages, and I'll say, I also raise for our fund, and 2 of the places that I love to raise the most is, Nashville and Dallas, and because those people are not as exhausted and they don't hear as much, and they're not visited as much, and therefore I get more time with people, I get more real feedback with people, I develop better relationships, and so I've even found that I'm able to create better relationships on some of these outside hubs as well. And the other thing is, obviously in a remote first world, people are actually less, that's an advantage now as well, people less care about where you are physically, and they're totally okay that you're now somewhere closer to your family or closer to your hobbies, and they can see that makes you more of a well-rounded founder. And there's a ton of great Slack groups, Discord groups, Zoom meetings, all of these things where you can continue to network just from your home and still create awesome relationships.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, just to wrap that up, I mean, that is great. I really see, what distinguishes the Bay Area a lot is that everybody's in proximity and there's fast iteration, there's velocity that's happening. Where I'm excited about what's happening here in Utah, and you see all the different scope across life sciences, that there's opportunities, whether it's manufacturing, engineering, or whatever the tech ecosystem, to be able to iterate fast and to have those partnerships is really what makes velocity happen. So I do like what's here in Utah, and I see that it'll be a continuing migration this way. I'm excited for the times here.
Yeah, well, we're certainly excited about what is happening here, and excited that you all are a part of our community and came here to share your advice with the room today. So thank you so much, you guys.